Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Time with PIAC. Today we are coming your way with highlights of the latest reports of the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. That is the 2024 annual report on the management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. As part of its mandate, PIAC has an obligation to publish 2 reports each year. That is an annual report and a semi-annual report. The committee has gone through the process of publishing the 2024 annual report, and it's actually launched it just yesterday. And today we are coming your way with highlights of this report. I'll be joined by my guest shortly, but note that this is an interactive session, so you can send in your questions and comments as the discussion progresses, and we will respond to them. I am your host, Jessica Echampon. So joining me today is Constantine K.M. Kujeji, Esquire, and he is the chair of PIAC and also represents Christian groups on the committee. And he would walk us through highlights of the reports that the committee just published. Hello, Constantine K.M. Kujeji, Esquire, PIAC chair. We are glad to have you on Time with PIAC today.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And it's my pleasure to be here with you to discuss issues concerning the 2024 annual report. So it's my pleasure to be here once again.
Before we get into the details of the reports and the highlights, how much revenue, how we are doing in terms of production and all of that, we just want to give our viewers an opportunity to get to know PIAC, what exactly your reporting mandate is that actually led to you publishing this report. So you can just walk us through that.
Thank you very much. Let me say that PIAC is a creature of statutes, precisely the Petroleum Revenue and Management Act of 2011, Act 815. And precisely Section 51 establishes PIAC as a citizen-led body mandated to, as it were, monitor the compliance and use of petroleum revenue. And that is to say, to make sure that the use and utilization of petroleum revenue is in line with the laws that govern such management. So basically, that is our mandate. And alongside that, we have to also create a platform for debate with the public as to whether the use is in accordance with the law. And then we also, through our reports, do an independent assessment of the use and utilization of the petroleum revenue. And the essence is to actually advise stakeholders such as Parliament and Presidency on the use and the way forward for improvements in the use of petroleum revenue. So that is PIAC for you, and that is our mandate, as I will say it.
So now let's focus more on the reporting mandate. We know that PIAC has published about 28 reports. Does the law give you any reporting mandate?
Yes, the law does. The law does. In fact, I would say that this is our 27th report, and this is the 14th in terms of the annual reports, but then 27 in terms of the various reports. And actually, the law provides that we should come out with 2 reports each year. One, which is the annual report, should be out by 15th March of every year. And then we have a semi-annual report, which should be out by 15th September of each year. So each year we are to produce 2 reports for purposes of the management and use of petroleum revenue. So that is our mandate in terms of the reporting.
Very well, Chair. 15th March and 15th September. I know the next question that you are preempting is we launched the reports in April. So are we in breach of the law?
I wouldn't say we are in breach of the law, sometimes, yes, the law is there to be complied with. But then sometimes when you go through the process of complying with the law, there are some administrative bottlenecks that makes you delay, not deliberately, okay, but sometimes challenges here and there. You know, we come out with this report through data received from various reporting institutions. And sometimes when we demand for these reports, I will say, even though we demand it in time and on time, sometimes the receipt delays. So slightly you go beyond the deadline as given by the law. But that, in my view, is not a breach or a deliberate breach of the law. So that is the reason why we published the report on 29th April. That's about 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks after the deadline. But as I said, it's not deliberate. Yes, it's not deliberate at all.
So before PIAC comes out with any of its reports, we know that there's broad consultation, there are reviews and all of that, just in a bid to ensure that whatever reports we put out there, whatever information is captured out there is a true reflection of what is on the ground. So can you just walk us through the processes that led to this particular report?
Yes, good. So the report, as you can see, had to be 2 in a year. We have the full annual report and then we have the semi-annual report. Now, this is the annual report, so it covers January to December 2024. So basically, we start by writing to the various stakeholders in the upstream petroleum industry. So those who are involved in production of petroleum, those who are involved in receipt of revenue in respect of such production, those who are involved in sale of petroleum, you know, in their raw form. So once we write to them, they have to give us the data. So I'm talking of institutions like Ghana National Petroleum Company, institutions like the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Ghana, the Ghana Revenue Authority, the Ministry of Energy, and even the petroleum producing companies. Because sometimes we even have to do reconciliation. If A gives me a data, we need to cross-check with B if the same data is being given so that we know that we are in tandem with that. So we write and then we give them a deadline to give us these reports. So once they do so, we compile the initial reports from the various institutions, and then we do what we call validation. Now, let me add, the committee is such that we have 4 subcommittees. And therefore, one of the subcommittees, which is the technical subcommittee, deals with the reporting. So most of the work before we come out with this report is dealt with by the technical subcommittee. So we go through the process as I was elaborating. We do the validation. So the validation, in essence, is for the stakeholder institutions to confirm that what they gave us is actually what we have put in the report. If there are any disparities, any inconsistencies, we correct them. Then after that, it's sent to editors for review. We have internal reviewers, we have external reviewers. So after the review, then it comes to the committee. Okay, the committee itself made up of the 13 constituent groups. And then we deliberate on it. We look at the recommendations, the observations, the findings, and then the recommendations, and then we approve before it is finally published.
So if you're just joining us, this is Time with PIAC, and today we are looking at the latest report of PIAC, that is the 2024 annual report on the management and use of petroleum revenues. I'm joined by the PIAC chair, Constantine K.M. Kujaji, who has just walked us through the process that the committee goes through before it finally approves and then publishes its report. Chair, at this point, we want to delve into the reports proper. So we'll start with production. How did we fare in terms of production for January to December 2024?
Thank you very much for the question. Now, over the period, that is the past 5 years, that is from 2019, okay, we have been recording a downward trend in terms of our production. Now, 2019, we had the peak of our production at 71 thereabout million barrels of crude oil. So I'm talking in terms of crude oil. Now, it declined to 66 million thereabout in 2020, further declined to 55. It further declined to 51 this year, and then through 48, and then this year we still had a decline, but in comparative terms with last year, it was just a decline of 7,000 barrels. So last year we had 48,247,037 million barrels of crude oil produced. This year we have 48,240,030 million barrels of crude oil produced. So there is a slight decrease of 7,000 barrels. If you compare with the previous years, it's not a steep kind of decline. So we hope that that is the end of the declining phase, and this year we may go up back to probably in the 50s, heading back to 70 million thereabouts. Yes, so we are still low, but in comparative terms, it's not bad as regards to the extent of the decline. Now, so that is for crude oil, and we have 3 fields producing the crude oil. So we have the Jubilee field, we have the 10 field, and then we have the SGN, which is Sankofa Jinyame and Tome field. Now, the Jubilee field recorded the highest, which is 66% of the total crude oil produced. And that is about 31,849,046 barrels of crude oil. And then we have the SGN producing 20% of that. And that 20% is 9,606,544 barrels. And then the 10 field recorded 14%, which is the lowest, and that is 6,784,840 million barrels. So that is by way of our production for 2024 in terms of crude oil.
In terms of gas, do we have some production figures to share? Yes,
with gas, we have, we recorded a total of 280,511 standard million cubic feet. Now, gas is measured in cubic feet, not like barrels like crude oil, even though you can make the necessary comparisons to know, but that's the standard of measurement for gas. And with that one, the SGN field recorded the highest, which is 136,824.96 thousand standard million cubic feet. The Jubilee field recorded 85,385.05, and that's about 30% of that. Now, let me say that the SGN field contributed about 49%. So almost half came from one field. And then the 10 field recorded 21%, which is 58,301.02 standard million cubic feet of gas. So that's by way of gas, raw gas production. When I say raw gas, I mean natural gas. Yes.
So how does these figures translate into revenue for the state?
Good. Yes, so when you look at the streams of revenue, okay, which came to the state, these products, that is crude oil and natural gas, fetched us about 1,357,793,869 US dollars. Now, even though, let me add that even though this year's production is still low, incidentally, what it fetched for the state is the second highest in terms of revenue. And the reason had to do with prices. Okay, you know, crude oil and gas prices fluctuate. Sometimes they come up, sometimes they are up. Sometimes they come down, sometimes they are up. And depending on the world economic circumstances, your production may be low. But if the price of crude oil and gas are high, you are likely to get high. So the highest was 2022 because of COVID and other things. And of course, this one can be attributable to the Ukraine kind of Russia-Ukraine conflict. So in a way, that shot up the revenue. But to the issue of how much, in terms of the Jubilee field gave us 475,448,447 million dollars. The 10 field gave us 150,425,176.41. And then the SGN gave us 217,648,904, thereabout, $million. So that adds up to give us the cumulative. I don't know if you want us to go into the details as to the various streams of revenue, but in simple terms, we have what we call CAPI. Now, the CAPI is carried and participating interest, okay? The stake, equity stake of the government in the various petroleum fields. And that CAPI fetched us 603,538,337.92 in terms of revenue. And then we have CIT, which is corporate income tax that is paid by the companies, fetched us 502,873,263. And then we have royalties. Royalties are upfront payments from crude oil production. And that fetched us 239 million. PHF income fetched us 10 million thereabout dollars. Now the PHF is Petroleum Holding Fund. And the income from that is $10,818,463. And then surface rental, you know, the petroleum fields are demarcated into blocks. And you pay rent like you are paying ground rent when you acquire land, a piece of land. So the income from there is 512,711. And then other income fetched the 66,902. These are surcharged incomes that have been paid by the companies that have been surcharged by GRA to pay. So that is basically the streams of revenue, and that adds up to the figure I mentioned earlier.
That's the 1.3
yes,
billion
1.3
US
billion,
dollars
exactly,
that came in as revenue for January to December 2024. Very well. We'll now look at some of the key findings of your report. We know that as usual with PIAC, we are always making findings, we are always making observations, we are always making recommendations. So we are definitely expecting some findings from the 2024 annual report. So if you can just highlight some for us.
Yes. So the first observation we made, I will talk about observation before we go to the findings, is
Sure.
that still there is no new petroleum agreement signed by the state. So as at 2024, since 2018, no agreement has been signed. Now, petroleum revenue, as I indicated, increased as compared to 2023. Now, 2023 was 1.062 billion thereabouts. This year we have 1.3 billion. So that's an increase, and that's an increase of 27.8% in terms of revenue. Now, the Ghana Heritage Fund, which is a fund created for use by future generations in terms of petroleum revenue, also recorded an increase of 21.31. So the reserves also of the Ghana Stabilization Fund. Now, this fund was created to, for want of a better word, stabilize the economy when we are balancing, or we seem not to be on firm grounds. Again, that also increased by 3.46%, even though there were some withdrawals. So these were some key observations that we made, we saw. But then in terms of the findings, as I highlighted earlier on, there was a drop, there was a decline for the fifth consecutive time. So production has dropped from 71 million in 2019 to 48 million barrels in 2024. But as I said earlier, when you compare the drop last year, this year's drop is not significant in that it's just a drop of 7,000 barrels as compared to last year. So we hope that very soon things will improve. And then the total proceeds, PIAC has always, made a point about a subsidiary of GNPC taking petroleum and not paying the revenue into the
PHF.
Exactly, the PHF. And PIAC has always had concerns with that. Now, this subsidiary was known as Jubilee JOHL, Jubilee Oil Holding Limited. Now, this subsidiary has changed names and is now called GNPC Exploco. Now, one would have expected that the revenues from the liftings by this entity will still go to the PHF. But still, this year, we also realized that the total revenue in terms of liftings by this entity was not paid into the PHF as stipulated. So if you look at it cumulatively, we have about 488 million, 704 thereabout dollars as revenue from these liftings which have not been paid into the PHF. PIAC has already made its position clear. The stakeholders involved, precisely GNPCs, of the view that no, that amount cannot be paid into the PHF because rather they have to pay dividends, etc. We are still on the issue and we hope to resolve it in due course. So that is another thing that we found. And then we also realized that surface rentals is still high. It appears we are not collecting the rent. And it is not too good when it's high. It's still in arrears, about 60%. It's due to only 3 companies. So you can imagine, yes. So we need to make sure that we collect the relevant arrears from the entities that owe the surface rental. Now, again, Ghana could not also recover a makeup gas. Okay, this is gas that we paid for to lift from the SGN field, and we were given 5 years to do so. Unfortunately, we couldn't recover the gas or lift the gas, so we have forfeited it. And that is the practice in the industry. When something is due you, crude oil, you have to lift within a specific time. If you don't lift, it's forfeited. The same thing applies to gas. So we forfeited that, and that tells us that we need to also expand our gas infrastructure, because it appears we didn't have a place to even lift this gas and send it. So that is a very serious issue. And we are talking of 1,186.81 standard million cubic feet of gas, which we've lost as a state. Yes.
Do we have any specific finding on the use of the ABFA?
Yes, I think that is on 5. Yes. The ABFA requires that part of the amount be channeled towards industrialization. This year, we recorded a 0% in terms of industrialization. So that's another thing that PIAC is concerned about, because it appears we are not giving much attention to industrialization from our petroleum revenue. So that's one area about the utilization of the ABFA.
The utilization. Okay, do we have any specific finding on either Ghana Gas or GNPC with regards to how they use their revenues?
Yes, that has to do with some loan obligations, okay, borne by GNPC, which is now being transferred to the subsidiary, GNPC Exploko. And for me, that's serious, because a new subsidiary, yes, and you saddle it with debt, it affects its sustainability. Okay, so there is a need to look at that. And I think steps should be taken, to rectify that, because otherwise it affects the very sustainability of Exploko as the commercial wing of GNPC. That is the intention. So if debt owed by the main company is being transferred to the subsidiary, then the question is, where does it start from? Can you begin a business with a debt? Yes, so that is what we must look at. Yeah.
We know that closely following your findings are some recommendations which you've made over and over again. I can talk about the surface rental issues. I think it's a constant feature of PIAC's report because the debt remains high. We also see the recommendation on the transfer of funds into the PHF by then JOHL, but now GNPC Exploko. Is it the case that we are not really getting results or action on the recommendations that PIAC makes? And that is why we see some of these recommendations recurring every time in your reports?
To a large extent, yes, and to some extent, no. If it keeps reoccurring, it means that we've made the recommendations and actions are not being taken on that. And therefore, we must find a way of making sure that the recommendations are complied with. Of course, we have the reporting institutions that we report to, for instance, Parliament and the presidency, of course. I think once these recommendations come, Parliament should make sure that they are complied with. You see, it's been an issue of PIAC saying this, stakeholders, the reporting institutions saying this. And we are tempted to believe that maybe we may have to get a definitive decision on this so that we are all clear. Because the issue is that whilst we recommend, we cannot actually enforce the recommendation. And that's one way that our mandate is impacted negatively. So we are still brainstorming on how we can get these recommendations enforced. The only way out is to maybe seek some interpretation at the relevant court as to whether or not these monies constitute petroleum revenue within the context of the Act and therefore has to be paid into the PHF. So that should be the ultimate or last resort. Now, in terms of the petroleum industry itself, okay, PIAC reiterates the position that there is a need for more investment drive into the industry, because since 2018 there hasn't been any petroleum agreement signed. The question is, what is happening? Is it that we are not attracting the needed investment? So we need to look at that, so that steps can be taken by the ministry and other agencies to secure investments in the upstream petroleum industry. Yes.
Sure. So, Chair, after publishing these reports, we make our beautiful recommendations. Do we just publish and then go back to sleep, or does PIAC have maybe structured way of disseminating the reports, doing advocacy, making sure that the report actually gets to Parliament? You mentioned Parliament or the presidency. Are there specific things that the committee does post the launch of its report?
Yes. After the report, of course, it's carried through to the media. We submit our report to the powers that be, precisely Parliament. And then, of course, you see there is a third mandate about independent assessment. That's what our report does. And the essence is to inform policymakers about how best they can improve on the utilization and management of petroleum revenue. And therefore, once we submit our report, we have to also make sure that the recommendations are carried through. But as I said, we do this through debates, etc., with the public. Unfortunately, sometimes, you don't get the full complement of the report, of the recommendations made being implemented. And that's the worry. Yes, we can engage with our institutions to make sure that the recommendations are carried through. So that is the step we take after, these are the steps we take after the publication of the report. And after this report, we still have to come out with the semi-annual report for 2025. So after this report, whilst we see to its implementation, we have to also start the process of making sure we come out with the next report. So that is the process we go through in terms of implementation after publication of the report.
So 27 reports published so far since 2011. How relevant have the reports been? And then how accessible are your reports to the public?
Excellent. When you say how relevant, I mean, you cannot underestimate the relevance of our reports. Our reports contain valuable data, to inform policy formulators. Even academia, you can use a PIAC report to do a research on the use of petroleum revenue and its management since 2010, when we started producing petroleum. So in terms of the relevancy, there is absolutely no doubt that the PIAC report is very relevant. And it will interest you to know that in recent times, some politicians have even referred to the PIAC report, the kind of things we said in terms of what was happening and how we can change things. I mean, politicians have referred to it. And that tells you how important it is. It's just that sometimes we look at it, we brush it off, oh, it's one of those things. So we don't take it serious. But if you look at it, you get a lot of information, a lot of insight in terms of how petroleum revenue has been managed in this country. So the PIAC report is very important. And that is why we keep making sure that we come out with these reports on the yearly basis, twice yearly as our mandate indicates. Yes.
Accessibility of the PIAC report?
Oh, accessibility, yes.
Is it the case that
it's
anybody
very accessible.
Can just walk into PIAC and get
yes,
a copy?
Yes, anybody can come in and get a copy. Those of us who are internet oriented or whatever, it's online, you can always access it. Yes. So it's very, very accessible. It's very, very accessible. And we have the citizens version for those who cannot read the technical things in the main report. We have a simplified version. So it's very accessible. Yes.
As we wrap up our conversation today, just be reminded that the PIAC report, according to the chair of PIAC, it has valuable data that you need to get a copy. So head to our website, www.piacghana.org, and download the full report and get further details beyond what we have discussed today. So thank you to Constantine K.M. Kujenji, who's the PIAC chair, for spending time with us and then sharing these valuable insights with our viewers.
Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure, Jessica, for being on this edition of Facebook Live PIAC. Thank you.
And to you, our audience, thank you for staying with us. Like always, PIAC remains open to your questions and your comments. So reach out to us via any of our channels, that is Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, PIAC Ghana. You can also send us a WhatsApp on 055-441-6544 to request a copy of the report, and we'll gladly give it to you. If you have any questions as well, you can send it to us via WhatsApp and we will respond to them. Until we come your way with another edition of Time with PIAC, let's stay connected. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'm Jessica Echampon.